So, here's a question to start us off. How does a political claim, maybe one first mentioned sort of off the cuff, almost like a threat or even a joke, how does that morph into this uh, pervasive political philosophy? One that genuinely reshapes a major party and, well, leads to serious civil unrest. That's the journey we're looking at today, and actually, we're trying something a bit different here. Think of it as an extended summary. Our previous reviews often zoom in, offering a focused analysis, right?
Right.
But this time, we're delivering a more comprehensive overview. We'll be tracing the intellectual roots, the key arguments, and the real-world impact of the subject. We'd really love to know if you find this expanded format helpful, so please let us know. Your feedback helps us figure out future content.
Yeah, definitely let us know. And today, we're diving into Jonathan Lemire's 2022 nonfiction book, The Big Lie: Election Chaos, Political Opportunism, and the State of American Politics After 2020. Lemire's background is key here. He's Politico's White House bureau chief, also an MSNBC host. So he brings this really journalistic, investigative perspective. The book draws on dozens of interviews with people right in the thick of it.
And just so everyone's aware, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation. This is powered by Google's NotebookLM, designed to give you deeper, more dynamic book summaries.
Okay, so our mission today is really to trace this core subject. The persistent claims from Donald Trump and other Republican figures that the 2020 U.S. presidential election was, rigged or stolen. But Lemire doesn't frame it as just something that popped up after the election. The book argues this whole narrative, what many now call the big lie, is more like a philosophy of doubting institutions that actually started much earlier and, well, fundamentally changed how politics operates.
Okay, let's unpack that. The idea that this was brewing before 2020, that feels a bit counterintuitive. If the book says it started earlier, where does Lemire actually pinpoint the beginning? When was that groundwork for questioning elections really laid?
Well, the book argues it goes way back to 2016, actually. Lemire uses this specific anecdote from a campaign rally in Ohio. This was before the election against Hillary Clinton. Trump actually suggested out loud that he might not accept the result if he lost, said the system was rigged.
Wow. That really does feel like a moment, doesn't it? A break from the norm in American politics. It wasn't just attacking an opponent. It was aiming at the whole structure, the integrity of the election itself.
Absolutely. And here's the really interesting part, the paradox. Trump won in 2016, but the narrative didn't just vanish. The idea that the system was fundamentally unfair to him or to his supporters, that became a kind of permanent fixture in his rhetoric. So the significance, maybe the danger of that 2016 comment wasn't just the immediate threat. It was about establishing this frame, this idea of institutional doubt, making the system itself the potential enemy no matter what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It essentially preloaded a justification for any loss down the road.
Okay, so if that seed was planted back then,
Right.
okay, how does the book describe the environment between 2016 and 2020? What allowed that seed of doubt to really take root and grow so fast? The setting must have played a role, right?
Oh, massively. Lemire really emphasizes how this narrative kept getting pushed in very public, very visible places. Think campaign rallies, televised debates. And crucially, the book dives into the role of social media, how fast things spread, and also the highly polarized news landscape. These things created, echo chambers, basically. Unproven claims could just explode, gain traction with the base, and kind of steamroll traditional fact-checking. It really polarized people even before the 2020 vote happened.
Which then brings us right to that pivot point,
Yeah.
the 2020 election loss itself. When the results came in and were, undeniable by objective measures, the book seems to describe not shock or confusion, but this incredibly rapid, almost choreographed response.
Yeah.
Mobilizing these fraud claims. What did Lemire's reporting find about just how fast that happened?
The speed was pretty breathtaking, according to the book. Lemire lays out this immediate, almost three-pronged strategy that unfolded. First, you had public statements of outright denial from Trump himself. Second, an instant barrage of lawsuits. Many seemed pretty poorly supported, filed across multiple swing states. And third, the organization of these large ongoing public rallies, basically turning that sense of political loss into organized denialism about the election itself. The message was consistent. It was stolen. The process was corrupt.
Right, but a strategy like that, it can't just be one person or a small group, can it? It needs a whole ecosystem, politically and in the media, to actually work, to amplify it. How does the book break down who the key players were in pushing this narrative until it reached, critical mass?
Yeah, this is where Lemire's reporting really focuses on political opportunism. The book argues that insisting the election was illegitimate quickly became almost like a litmus test, a requirement for getting ahead within the party. Lemire shows how different Republican officials, candidates too, started echoing these claims. The motivation, the book suggests, was often self-preservation, maybe winning a primary, showing loyalty rather than, deep-seated belief in the claims themselves. This created this powerful feedback loop where denying the result was politically rewarded.
Okay, let's get specific then. The book apparently identifies three main groups that were really instrumental in spreading this and making it seem legitimate after the loss. Can you break those down for us?
Sure, Lemire points to three key pillars, you could say. First, Republican Party leadership. We're talking senior figures in Congress, state officials. Their role was kind of twofold. Some actively supported and amplified the claims,
Right.
but just as important, according to Lemire, was the failure of others to actively counter the claims. That silence, essentially, helped normalize the narrative for the wider party base.
Okay, so leadership is one. What's the second group?
The second is right-wing media figures, commentators, social media influencers. Lemire describes them as the engine, really, the engine of dissemination. They took sometimes complex or legalistic claims and translated them into these really emotionally charged, often false narratives, and they did it constantly, legitimizing the fraud story for a huge audience, 24/7.
Makes sense. And the third group involved?
The third group highlighted in the book is the candidates and officials themselves, specifically those who actively embraced the denial platform. This ensured the whole issue didn't just become a historical footnote about 2020. It made it a current, actionable political demand, especially for people running for office later, like in the 2022 midterms. This really cemented the position of election deniers as this new powerful force within the party. And just a quick mention here, Mindful Moments, that's our YouTube channel. It offers a book analysis, summaries, critiques, all aimed at inspiring reflection and rational thought.
Okay, so this cycle amplification, opportunism, the media engine, it builds and builds, reaching this critical point.
Yeah.
And the book portrays the January 6th attack as the most violent and visible outcome of all this, right?
Exactly. You're talking about the January 6th, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Lemire presents this event not as some sort of spontaneous outburst, but as the direct, violent culmination of that whole months-long campaign. All the denial, the organized misinformation, it led directly there. It was the moment when, rhetoric turned into actual physical violence, aimed right at the heart of the democratic process, the certification itself.
This is where the specifics from the book are really important. What does Lemire actually report about the ongoing fallout? How does this philosophy, as he calls it, continue to shape politics after 2021?
Well, the book details some pretty profound and lasting effects. The most obvious one is the rise of these election deniers as a really dominant and demanding faction inside the Republican Party. But beyond that, the book highlights a distinct pattern of legislative action in many states. Laws introduced, sometimes passed, often framed as being about election integrity. But the effect, Lemire argues, was frequently to make voting harder or to shift power away from nonpartisan election officials towards more partisan actors.
Can we drill down on that legislative pattern a bit? What kind of changes are we talking about, according to the book?
Yeah, Lemire's reporting points to things like new restrictions on mail-in voting, limiting where ballot drop boxes can be placed, and maybe most significantly, laws that give partisan officials or even state legislatures more power to potentially challenge or even overturn certified election results. It shows a kind of philosophical shift, doesn't it? From just challenging one specific past result to actively trying to change the rules for future elections.
Wow. And what about the human cost? The book apparently focuses quite a bit on individuals who were targeted election officials, even Republicans who just refused to go along with the fraud narrative. Who were these people? What did they go through?
Yes, the book gives some really specific, powerful examples here. People like Brad Raffensperger, the Georgia Secretary of State, or Rusty Bowers, who was the Arizona House Speaker, both Republicans, by the way.
Right.
They faced intense pressure, threats of violence, political ostracization, basically for doing their jobs, for upholding their constitutional duty to count the certified votes accurately. Their stories, as told by Lemire, really illustrate the enormous pressure on anyone who stuck to the factual reality of the results. It also shows the increasing radicalization faced by officials who simply dared to dissent from the dominant party line on this.
It's clearly a journalistic account focusing on events. But stepping back, what would you say are Lemire's core themes? Beyond the timeline of what happened, what bigger lessons or ideas does he seem to be drawing from this period?
The themes are quite sobering, really. Lemire seems intensely focused on the fragility of democratic institutions. how easily they can be manipulated when subjected to sustain high-level campaigns of falsehood. He explores how quickly a major political party could be, well, fundamentally bent towards a single narrative, even one lacking solid evidence.
Hmm.
Ultimately, the book presents this whole episode as a kind of a case study in the escalating dangers of extreme hyperpartisanship and the deep public distrust that grows out of it, making it harder and harder to agree on even a shared reality.
And his writing style, the narrative approach, seems to mirror that sense of urgency you're describing. You said it's journalistic, based on interviews, feels very immediate.
That's exactly right. Structurally, it's mostly linear, following the timeline. But Lemire's technique relies heavily on descriptive reporting, almost like you're there, and lots of dialogue capturing public speeches, but also apparently private interactions. It gives the reader this very immediate front row seat to the political chaos as it unfolded. It feels less like a dry academic history, much more like a detailed day-by-day dispatch from right inside the storm. And really, this all comes back to what the book poses as its central, quite provocative question for all of us, for the listener. What are the long-term compounding consequences when conspiracy theories take hold in politics, especially on the basic structures of democracy? And maybe more importantly, what level of rigorous critical thinking does this new reality demand from everyone, from the electorate moving forward? The book sort of suggests the lie itself, in a way, has become an operating principle for a significant chunk of the American political world.
That analysis really underscores why this book remains so relevant. For a deeper look, click the link on screen for our in-depth book critique. Please subscribe, share, maybe purchase the book via the link, and always think rationally.